Welcome back. It's the Anti Madden with another marquee matchup segment for Week 8 of NFL play. We're going to be looking at the marquee matchup between the Packers going into the Mile High and playing the Broncos. Now, I'm going to go over and set the stage a little bit. Both teams are coming off their bye week. It's the second game between Rodgers and Manning. Manning not really playing that well up to this point, but they were still 6-0. Manning had 10 interceptions, and everybody and their mom is questioning his arm strength, okay? So we got Peyton not really playing that well, learning the new offense, got a new coach, but the defense is playing really well, keeping them in games and actually winning games for them. It's just the fourth time in NFL history that two teams of 6-0 have met each other in the regular season, and the Broncos defense is balling with the league-leading 26 sacks. But guess who's right behind them with 23 sacks? Yes, that is the Green Bay Packers. So they got a nice little defense too. Broncos, just to go a little bit further into their defense, the Broncos have 14 sacks. They forced 3 interceptions, and they've got 2 fumbles when they're in their 4-man pressure packages. Now, that's just base. They're running 4 dudes at you, Von Miller on one side, DeMarcus Ware, and they're just getting to you. So they got all the coverage and they're only getting 5 guys, and they're still getting sacks. So that's pretty nasty. And no quarterback has topped 300 yards on the Broncos this season, and only one receiver has gotten 100 yards, which was Cleveland's Travis Benjamin this season. Wade Phillips, who's the defensive coordinator for the Broncos, said the week coming up, leading up to the game, that Talib and Harris represent the best cornerback tandem that he's ever had. Now, that's a pretty big statement from a coach who's coached in the league for plus 30 years. 30 years of coaching, and it's the best corners he's ever had. Broncos, oddly enough, were an underdog for the first time in 3 years. Basically, since his 3rd week playing for the Broncos as their starting quarterback. So not too many people were thinking that the Broncos had a chance of beating the Packers, even though their defense was pretty nice. But everybody, I think, was just looking at how Peyton was playing poorly and how they were winning despite that. And they were just like, look, he can't keep doing this. The defense can't keep getting turnovers, getting touchdowns, getting sacks. It can't keep happening. And their run game is terrible. Let's not even talk about the run game. The run game for the Broncos was at the bottom of the league, like 70 yards plus per game, which was really bottom of the barrel. One little odd note, though, from the media, people were talking about, people have been looking at Lacy's production this season and how he's not really been playing that well either. They had an ankle injury that was noted, and they were saying that how he's not really playing that well. And somebody in the media actually asked him if they thought he was fat. Like, dude, are you too fat? Is the reason you're too fat why you're not playing that well? And Lacy was like, look, man, I'm in a nice weight. There's no problem. And I had an ankle injury. What's your problem? Now you're trying to call me fat. They're trying to call him fat. So I just thought that was a little bit interesting. Like, the media will just pick up on anything. Oh, he's not playing well. He's fat. That's why he's not playing well. Because he's fat. Because he's fat, he's not playing well. So why don't we just get into this game? Let's get into the game. The first 2 drives that the Broncos had and the Packers had, the defense is held up. Neither team could score, went up the field a little bit, and then had to punt the ball. And then the Broncos, though, I got to say, they were steady. They went over the bye week. They were looking at how poorly they were running the ball, and they committed themselves to running the ball. They're steady working that pistol formation, and with 6:33 in the first, the Packers run a cover 2 sink look, which gets killed because they run a play action because they'd been loosening up with the run game. They run a play action, and Peyton Manning finds Demaryius Thomas on a post route for 30 yards. So it's a nice little play. The Broncos, they go back to work in the ground game, and they get in for the first score of the game. Now, the Broncos D basically shut out the Packers for the majority of the quarter, basically running just kind of cover 1, and then on 3rd down, they would run like 2-man under, and it seemed to just be working on them. The Packers receivers, they couldn't get separation. The Broncos DBs were just pretty much staying with the routes. The first play of the second quarter, Manning hits Demaryius Thomas on a fade route for 47 yards. I mean, he just beats the 3rd-year player, Casey Hayward, up the sideline. Kind of how people like to do on Madden. when they just throw a fade route and the dude just jumps over it. That's what he did on that play. Then Ronnie Hillman busts a 15-yard run, draw play to take the Broncos up 14-0. So right now, the Broncos leading 14-0. The Packers not really getting it going. And, they need to come back and score. Then the Broncos actually score again on a field goal, take the lead 17-0. Then it starts to get a little bit worrisome for the Packers. They need to get a score. So the Packers have got the ball. They're trying to move the ball. The Broncos actually do a good job of stopping them. There was a crucial penalty on third down against the Broncos when they ran what was a free safety blitz. A 60-year player, David Bruton, comes in basically with an untouched blitz, cracks Aaron Rodgers, and he gets called for roughing the passer. If you look at the play, I didn't really think he was roughing the passer, but in today's NFL, you can't touch quarterbacks. You can't put a finger on them because you're going to get a penalty. So that kept the drive alive for the Packers, and the Packers scored with 3 minutes to go, and kind of like they got themselves back into the game. 17-7. It's not looking so terrible, and they get the ball at half, so they score before the half. Knew they're going to get the ball back, so they can come back 17-14, get this thing back rolling again. So the Packers need to score, and then that opening drive, they only get a field goal. So 17-10, and on the very next drive, Manning marches them right down the field with the help of C.J. Anderson. Broncos are up 24-10, and it's not out of reach for the Packers, because they got a high-flying offense, but they really needed to score on that next possession. They really need to score. 24-10, this can get out of hand real quick, especially if Peyton Manning ends up having a good game, which he was having a pretty decent game throwing the ball. The run game was working really nicely. So the Packers have the ball with 5:25 to go in the third, and the Broncos show them a single high look, which they've pretty much been showing all game. And it's a really popular defense in the NFL just generally. Single high looks, press the corners, and then when the play snaps, it's either going to be a cover 3 or it's a cover 1. And a lot of times it's a cover 1 when you're talking about the top defenses in the league, because they think that their corners can cover, and they can. And they pretty much shut people down. And they pretty much only ran, again, 4 guys after Aaron Rodgers. And it just looked like Aaron Rodgers wasn't able to find people on his first read. Because the Packers ended up coming up empty on that drive. And then the futility of the offense just started to show. Like, Rodgers would drop back, look for his first read, and here comes pressure in his face. Or he'd slide out of the pocket and nobody would be open. So it wasn't really looking good for the Packers offense. I don't know if they're missing Jordy Nelson or the plays they were running, but they didn't run the ball well. Eddie Lacy, I think he had, 38 yards and 11 carries? That's terrible. And then Aaron Rodgers, let's look at his numbers. 14 of 22 passing for 77 yards. 77. That's not a misprint. Wow. So the Broncos defense ended up shutting them down with basically running like cover 1 hole, a little bit of 2-man under. They ran like some cover 1 LB blitz sometimes. They ran a cover 3 drop. They ran most of the time they would run cover 2 man on third down, and they just couldn't get open. And it seemed to me, if you look at the game, that the Packers defense, they ran a similar style. They ran single high safety, and they ran cover 1 and cover 3 sometimes. But the difference between the Broncos and the Packers receivers was the Broncos receivers could get open. The Packers receivers, they weren't getting open. And Rodgers was looking and be like, that dude's not open, and here comes pressure. Or you have to run and scramble out of the pocket. I don't know about this dude, what's his name, Richard Rodgers, but the Packers need to get a better tight end. They need to get somebody that can get separation and make big plays for them. Because without Jordy Nelson, bringing in James Jones might help because he's a veteran. He's played there before. He knows the system. But they look like they're lacking targets. Rodgers is lacking targets. And number one, the pressure when he's facing pressure with a good defense of the Broncos is that you don't even have time. Your first read needs to be open, which means you need man beaters. The Packers, what they needed? Man beaters. They needed somebody to be like, let me run this route. They needed somebody to get open because they just weren't getting open. So it was tough for them on the night. 77 yards, that means the defense must have been playing lights out, which they were. Let me just see, are there any key players of note?
I just looked at the Packers defense. They couldn't get to Peyton, couldn't get to him. They tried to run some blitzes, and normally I'm used to seeing Dom Capers' defense come with a lot of fire zone. But I guess they were like, this is Peyton Manning. We're going to keep this vanilla because he's going to potentially – we don't want to be the ones where he ends up throwing for 400 yards. So they were like, oh, let's just let Peyton play terrible because he has been and stay with cover one all game. But it didn't work. It didn't work. I mean, Demaryius Thomas was murdering. The run game where the Broncos put up 160 on the ground with the help of C.J. Anderson and Ronnie Hillman. The run game was hitting on all cylinders for them. I mean, 160 yards compared to the average of 70 that they've been getting. That's a huge game for them. They had both the passing game, the running game working, and the defense was just providing pressure. I mean, one play that epitomized the pressure came, I think, in the, let me see, I think it came at 12 minutes left in the fourth, and the Packers ran play action on first down, not fooling anybody. DeMarcus Ware comes off the edge, just nasty. Came in for the sack, ended up getting a sack fumble. The ball gets knocked around. One of the Denver linebackers, man, just hustled, knocks the ball, tried to, going for the ball, knocks the ball in the back of the end zone, and the Packers tight end, Rodgers, picks it up, stumbles, and then they end up, tackling him for the safety. But that just epitomized the Broncos' hustle. They were hustling all night and shut down one of the NFL's top offenses. So hats off, got to be to them. 7-0, Packers lose on the road to a good team, which everybody should know now that the Broncos are for real. Peyton Manning has his little funk, but if you look back at Peyton Manning and his struggles when he struggles, look at the year when he had his ACL and he came back and people were kind of doubting him, being like, oh, this Peyton is not really the same. Look, his rhythm is off. It took Peyton till about week 8 or 9 before he hit his stride. So maybe you could say the same thing here. New coach, new offense. Maybe it's taken Peyton a little bit of time to hit his stride, and hopefully he finishes out the year strong so that the Broncos can make the run, because that last run where they went to the Super Bowl and faced the Patriots, I kind of thought, that's Peyton's last chance. But with the defense they got this year, he may have one more opportunity. That window of opportunity hasn't shut yet. If the defense can play at the level they're playing at, they will be seeing Tom Brady in the postseason. I can guarantee you that one. So that's going to wrap it up for today's marquee matchup of the week. Next week, I'm going to take a look at the schedule and see who's going to be the marquee matchup next week. But hopefully it's going to be a good game, and we have a lot of things to talk about. Until next time, the Anti Madden's out.